I am here as a leader of this section. We have how many? 30 minutes, I think, for discussion. So shall we try with Michal Bubána? And you who have questions, well, you weren't here, so all those who are here. Are you coming here or you will also there?
I always just want to make sure we are still in English session.
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
We are in English because...
Okay, very well.
Okay, so please...
So please roast me.
Let's just remind it's about...
We were saying also mimetic imagination and its implications. Mimetic imagination is that which happens on the interface between your human experience and your knowledge on this world that is sustained and filled with the Spirit, with the Holy Spirit.
Could you say something more about these three categories of firstness, secondness, and thirdness?
It is.
Because I felt that there it was very interesting. You said that people, even those who are not converted, can experience God. If I got it correctly. So I would like to, if you could speak about this.
Yes, this concept of firstness, secondness, and thirdness is originally devised by this philosopher Charles Sanders Peirce, a famous American pragmaticist philosopher. He lived, he died in 1914, so long before Jan was even born. Firstness is pure possibility of anything. For example, this cheap plastic ballpoint pen, it simply is on some level. Secondness is the decisive concreteness of one thing against another. It is perhaps...
so the first is without attributes?
Without attributes. Attributes are what makes this it specific. It is cheap, it is plastic, it is blue, and so on.
Sorry, because... sorry that I interrupted.
Yeah, and thirdness is its interpretation.
So is it something which would be corresponding to Hegel, being, which is without... Hegel has this idea of being that is sort of identical with nothingness, because if you want the idea of being, you have to devoid it or to get rid of all attributes. But if you get being rid of all attributes, you have basically nothing. And Hegel somehow, I don't understand.
I'm not sure what Hegel's role would be, but as you are mentioning the idea that being almost equal to nothingness, this draws my attention to Jung's another source of his theology, which is his doctor father, Robert Cummings Neville.
Who?
Robert C. Neville. Robert C. Neville. And this Neville, he says that God is the one who holds all things and can't be a thing himself. Because if that were so, it would be determinate relative to other things and would have to find its relation to others via a third. So God as firstness. And now, firstness is not Neville's term. But what Jung does is actually he combines Neville's theological explanation of creation, creatio ex nihilo, with Peirce's elemental modes of firstness, secondness, and thirdness. Now, Neville says that God is the one who holds all things and can't be a thing himself. Because if that were so, it would be determinate relative to others via a third. So God as firstness. And now, firstness is not Neville's term. But what Jung does is actually he combines Neville's theological explanation of creation, creatio ex nihilo, with Peirce's elemental modes of firstness, secondness, and thirdness. as you suggested, maybe Neville somehow draws on Hegel. It's possible. I'm not really sure about that. But Neville says that God is only knowable through eternal creation, apart from which he is indistinguishable from nothing. Apart from creation, there is nothing to understand. So this is what Jung does. He takes this Peirce's idea of elemental modes, of firstness, secondness, and thirdness of anything, and applies it onto creation.
I must admit it's somehow beyond my comprehension.
Well, maybe even beyond my comprehension, but what seems very, very important to me is that this allows Jung to say that we must access God through creation, because that is the only possible way of knowing. After all, Christ is the best, the most perfect revelation of God. And
what about the word revelation in words, like the Bible?
Revelation of what?
Through words.
Through words. Well, here we come to. Jung's relation to the Bible is peculiar, because he is not a Bible scholar, he is a theologian. And it is very clear throughout his work, an exegete, a pure exegetical scholar, would have hard time understanding Jung, because even if we would understand him, he would have to disagree. So, Jung has a habit of somehow substituting or equaling or somehow mingling together the idea of God's word as logos, as Christ, revealed word of God, with the Bible itself. And the role of the Bible in all of this becomes important, for example, in that process of discernment. That is the chapter that I didn't cover in my presentation, but he has to come up with some theology of discernment, because if you say that, well, the Spirit blows where she chooses, what about the problem of evil? What about parts of the world that are not of the Spirit? So he comes up with the concept of the demonic. Demonic is that which refuses to align itself with the Spirit, with its will, and chooses its own way of being and of living. Yeah, but.
Okay, thank you. If there are questions?
I'd like to ask you, what interested you in this topic?
Well, I first heard about Jung some 7 years ago as a seminary student. I'm a happy graduate of Continental Theological Seminary in Brussels, which is Pentecostal school of theology. Now, Jung is Pentecostal theologian. He presents himself in this way, although he is certainly not conformist Pentecostal theologian. And ever since I was interested in what he has to say, and recently, some 2 years ago, as I was planning what topic to choose for my dissertation, I somehow recognized Jung as a good conversation partner in one part of my dissertation. So, what interested me, it kind of reminds me of that funny joke, internet meme, what inspired you to write this essay, asked to a professor, and the student replies, the due date. So it's kind of interesting, but I also have to deal with him in my dissertation.
Very good. More questions? Okay, if there are no questions, thank you. Now, please be on.
Just a quick summary for those who were not here. My topic was about decentralized finance, and we were trying to find the answer if decentralized finance is the redemption from debt-based monetary system. So, prepared to answer your questions?
I have some questions, but I don't want to begin already. You use I must warn you, as you know, I'm a lay person in economics, so maybe it's a stupid question. But you used the expression economic sentiment. Does it somehow correspond with hopes or faith or somehow in future? I don't mean religious faith.
Yes.
Is economic sentiment something like that? Or can you explain what economic sentiment is?
Yes, of course. So economic sentiment can be measured. So those are expectations. You have different areas of economy. For example, purchases managers. So those who are responsible in the companies for new orders, for ordering materials to be produced. So they are surveyed what are their expectations. They are the first who are seeing the markets, and they are at the production structure at the very first place. So that can be measured, but in general terms, economic sentiment means the expectations or hopes, how the economy would look like in the future. So
what is economic sentiment in Slovakia?
It's definitely declining. It's not only in Slovakia, but it's over the whole world. And we had kind of mania-depressive period. So we had the mania after the COVID, boosted from creation of new money, creation of new debt, and this debt money came in form of fiscal stimulus. So the governments were subsidizing, they were creating new money out of thin air, promises, and they were distributing this money through the fiscal measures, through the paychecks in US, through this COVID, Kurzarbeit in Germany, Slovakia, and other forms. And this boosted economy, this boosted credit, and this boosted expectations, and as a consequence, it boosted the prices. So we are now, after few months of the boosting economy, we are experiencing shortages, but actually it's a repricing because of the high demand for materials, for different things in the economy. The prices have risen, and that's the inflation. So
now about that money, all the countries in the world have a monetary system that is based on that money?
As I know, majority or most, maybe all. I'm not familiar with all 200 countries.
Well, I don't mean in this sense that each one.
Yes, all major economies are having their own currencies.
So dollar is based on that?
Yes. So every new dollar is, when it's created, a new debt is created, a new unit of debt is created.
Now another stupid question probably, sorry. Debt to whom or to what?
Okay, so if you have the ledger, if you have the double entry ledger.
What is ledger?
That's accounting, in accounting.
Say slova.
Účtovníctvo, dvojité účtovníctvo.
Ledger.
So you have the assets and liabilities. So you have the property and the promises to pay. So if you borrow money as a company and you buy assets, you owe to the bank or some lenders, and you own some assets. So the same way as the company's balance sheet is held, the banks are having balance sheet. So the assets are the loans provided, and liabilities is the real money. So So it's a double entry, and it's a ledger money and it's a debt money. So in every dollar, every euro which is created is somebody's asset, but also somebody's liability.
And when doomsday is coming?
It's you know, the economists are, or the general scientific community is making jokes about economists because their predictions are maybe the same quality as the meteorologists, so those who forecast the weather. And I agree, because those predictions are good, and those models are good for very short term, for 3 days, 5 days, half year, but not for 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. So there is empirical evidence that doomsday for the fiat currencies, it has repeated in last 2,000 years hundreds of times. So maybe for our presence, we experience that the US dollar is having a history of 200 something years. Euro has an experience of a few decades. But let's think of the Central European countries of Slovakia of the last 100 years. I think we had 4 or 5 currencies circulating here. So, and all of the currencies have collapsed. And the reasons are not just geopolitical. Most of the reasons of the major currencies are economic. So it's built on debt. It's different forms, and the debt has to be paid. And so when the debtors are asking to repay the debt, then it's let's say it's visible through inflation. So the death of the currency is when there is an inflation spiral. So that's the doomsday.
Okay.
It's hard to predict.
It's very interesting. Fascinating. Question?
Yes. Do you know who some of the major lenders are in the world?
Okay, so we have to distinguish between if you as an economic agent has some balance of the dollars that you actually don't borrow, you didn't borrow. So if you have savings, which is your savings, and you're not you have not borrowed those dollars from bank, so you are net lender, and net lenders are paradoxically are developing nations, or let's say poorer nations than Western. So if you take on country principle, so the West and let's say developing countries, the West is indebted, it's net debtor, and developing countries is net lender. So it's kind of geopolitical or economic type. So, but there are many answers to your questions. Maybe it's you need to specify the what do you mean who? Is it the countries? Is it the entities? So households are.
I think we understand more on a personal basis where we're borrowing from a bank, say, and we're borrowing the money that people have saved there, that kind of thing. But say a country, when a country borrows money, many countries are in debt. I know the U.S. is in trillions of dollars in debt.
It's usually, I think the Charles is looking for it. The big person we're in debt to is China.
Right.
Yeah.
So does that mean China does not have any debt?
Well, it has. First part of your question, there is a misconception and a misunderstanding even in economists. So if the money, as I said, is created every time when the debt is created. Okay, so you don't have to save to borrow to Peter. Okay, so Peter can keep the balance, and the bank can make out of thin air new debt, which is an asset to the bank and liability to you. and the new money is created. So for the second, the China, as I said, every debt has the other side, so somebody is owning the debt. So the debt securities, the bonds of US government, China is one of the biggest holders, that means the creditors, and that's a form of the debt. So the securities, the bonds, the government bonds is the debt, and the holder is the Chinese. So it's I think it's 4 trillion holding of the US debt.
4 trillion?
4 trillion, yes. And of course many other pension funds. So if you are a part of pension fund in Slovakia or US or whenever, you are holding debt of your country or foreign countries. Norwegian fund coming from oil and gas is holding lots of securities. Part of it is US debt, European debt, other debt. So debt is also the asset, the ownership of somebody else. So.
Thank you. Well, if there are more questions, me. Thank you.
Thank you.
You can discuss more with this during lunch. Questions? Are there questions about my lecture? No? Good. Добру chuť.